supply here that I brought for a demonstration. And I think that, let's see, when we get near the end, then I'll send the box around and drop that little cylinder thing in there if you want to be included to win the lottery. Now, if this thing is for the GS only, 2E version is identical except for the plug at the end, but I only have the GS version for the giveaway today. And also keep in mind that if you win this power supply, you've got to have space in your luggage to take it home. Now, if you got here by car, of course you've got the space, but if you came here by plane, keep in mind this thing probably weighs maybe 5 pounds or so. I have carried it on planes before. I suppose I would recommend put it in the checked luggage, not the carry-on luggage, because all the wires coming off of it will probably give TSA a fit. Okay, my name is Stephen Buggy, and let's see, the first thing is I wanted to mention about this little handout. I passed this around last year, so if you're here last year, you probably got a copy or you've at least heard of it. I call it my Apple Computer Will. I brought about 20 or 25 copies that are upstairs near the coffee machine. And the idea of this is to communicate to your family members that if you do die, and I'm almost 72, they should not throw away your Apple stuff. I think that's what happens in most cases. My wife has absolutely no interest in Apple II, and I know for certain it would go to the dump if I died. But the idea of this is that I've given her 3 names and contact information, Sean Fahey, James Littlejohn, and Tony Diaz, that if I pass away, she should contact them. They will arrange for somebody to come and pick up the stuff and bring it back here for the giveaway garage event up there. So I think you can adapt this to your own use just by crossing out my name and maybe writing in your family members' names and that. Now, one additional comment about this was pointed out to me earlier today, but I'd even thought of it before. Don't mix this in with your official will. My wife and I both have the kind of official will in a fancy cover prepared by a lawyer at great cost. And the thing is that if you put this in with your official will, the lawyer will feel an obligation to check up to make sure that the Apple stuff got here somehow. But the important thing is he probably put a really big fee on there just for checking up on it. I mean, I think his fee would be greater than the value of the Apple stuff, frankly. You know how lawyers tend to overcharge. So this should just be an informal thing between you and your family members. I'm quite sure that my wife and my 2 sons are going to fulfill on this, since I have talked with them about it. But keep it informal and don't mix it in with anything that a lawyer is going to see, because they're going to waste your family's money checking up somehow on it. Okay, my topic is power boosting the 2GS, and it is mentioned in this article. The article is actually quite old. It came out in the first volume of Juice GS back in '96. And you might be thinking, what's the point of doing a conference presentation when it's already in print? Well, I think the reason for doing this presentation is that there was only one picture on the article showing the outside of the rectangular box. And I've got 18 pictures that will show you what is done on the inside of the box to make it this power supply. I bought my first 2E in 1990, and I think like other users, I bought a lot of interface cards in those early years, and I think within 2 or 3 years, I started noticing that, first of all, the internal 2E power supply would tend to get hot, and also it would sometimes freeze up or shut down. That's kind of a safety feature if power supply is overloaded. And Applied Engineering was still in business at that time. I remember I bought the Applied Engineering heavy-duty power supply. It's about the same size as the standard 2E power supplies, but painted black. I think it was about $100, I think. And I tried that. It was a little bit better. I think you could maybe put in one additional interface card before it too froze up. So that made me think, is there any other way to work out the power situation, because I had so many cards and a lot of them took a lot of power. I remember I had Transwarp, and if any of you've had Transwarp 2E, that thing gets hot. And let's see, what's another one that, well, anyway, if you load up all the slots, you're going to have a heat problem inside the 2E. A lot of people try to handle it with fans. I think fans is only a Band-Aid solution for it. It doesn't really make it possible for you to run the computer efficiently. Then I noticed, I think it was in a thrift shop, an IBM power supply. They're about this size or even bigger. And I bought it and played around with it, noticing that it had exactly the same DC voltages that the Apple power supplies have. Apple power supplies use plus 5 volts, plus 12 volts, minus 5, and minus 12. And those are exactly the same voltages in these early IBM power supplies. Now, in more recent years, I first noticed this with Mac, and I think it might even be true with IBM. Somehow they have dropped down the number of different voltages from 4 separate voltages to 3. And I don't know if that's just a economy measure or what. I think what the negative voltages are used are as an independent comparison for the high amperage lines, which are plus 5 and plus 12. The plus 5 volt line is for the circuit board and all the interface cards. The plus 12 volts is for the motors in the disk drives. Okay, so these two positive voltages are the high amperage ones. The negative voltages are very low amperage. It's really just a comparison. It's kind of a safety feature. So somehow the power supply compares the minus 5 with the plus 5, and if they're the same voltage, then everything's fine. But if it's different, then it shuts down. And a lot of the circuits in the power supply are safety circuits to make sure that you don't damage the things that the power supply is connected to. Let's see. So I wrote this article in '96. That happens to be also the first year that I came to Kansasfest, and was at the other college across town. I'm wearing my '96 Kansasfest badge here. It's faded almost beyond where you can read it. Well, something I just noticed today on this badge, Kansasfest was only 3 days long back then. I know there's some old timers here like Tony Diaz. Tony, was it only 3 days long back then?
That year.
Oh, okay. I know it was considered a very successful Kansasfest. There was a long article about it in Juice GS about that, the Kansasfest that year. Okay, with these power supplies, I made quite a few of them in the '90s. Probably my biggest contribution to the Apple II world. I've numbered them. I've got a file at home with the names and the dates when everybody bought one, also which type that they got. And 240 were made, so this one is number 241. And it solves big problems that Apples tend to have. First of all, the power capacity of these units is extremely large. The standard 2E power supply is 35 watts. Let's see, there are two versions of the GS power supply. One was 38 and the other one was 40 watts. This one here is 230 watts capacity, 6 times the standard capacity of 2GS power supply. And with that much surplus power, it runs cold. Now I only put this one together last week at home, and I've gave it a long burn-in, about 10 hours at home, and then probably about another 15 hours up in my room up here. It can run all day, I'll run all night, and it doesn't get cold. Partly because of the excess capacity, but also the fact that it's got an internal fan. Okay. The way this works, well, let's see, it solves the heat problem in A couple different ways. Number one, the large capacity. And secondly, it's external. It rests on the floor underneath your computer table. I've got about a 6-foot cord on it. You put this thing down on the floor. I have put felt on the bottom so it doesn't scratch up hardwood floors. Could be an important problem with family members if this thing scratched up the floor. So you lay this thing on the floor, run this cable through the back of the 2GS. Now, you might have to cut that plastic a little bit to get this wide plug to go through that opening. And then you plug it into the motherboard socket on the GS. On this plug, I wrote facing sockets. Actually, there's only one way this is going to fit in anyway. It's got this thing called a polarizing ramp on it. It's also got a little tiny plug in the third hole, which is called the polarizing plug. That's to make sure that you don't plug it in slightly off where the things go into the wrong holes. Of course, that's going to burn out everything.
One side where that hole is plugged up.
What now?
There's no pin in that one spot where the hole is plugged up, so you can line that up.
Yeah, that makes it possible to line up. And if it was off on either side, you wouldn't be able to push the thing down. And that's a safety feature right there. I would say the biggest problem you'd have in making one of these now is going to be to find this kind of power supply. I mean, I tend to put dates on things. I've got a bunch of these still up on the garage shelf. And when I opened this thing up, I found that I got this power supply in August of '97. So this thing has been up on my garage shelf for 21 years. And they were fairly easy to find back then. I just think you have to look further. You might even go looking on eBay, and maybe you could buy one there. I mean, I used to buy these in thrift shops and junk stores, and it was pretty easy to find them. This is from this. The one for this shape is from the earliest IBM power supplies, or earliest IBM computers. Now, let's see. So you might have to look to find one, but the main thing is it's just got to have those 4 voltages. +5, +12, -5, -12. If it's got those 4 voltages, then you can proceed with the rest of it. Now, finding the plugs, let's see. The plug on the GS is called a Molex 7, and the crimp pins are these little pins inside. The original ones, I'm not sure if they have a name. I think they're called .156 something. But the very best ones to get are easily available on the internet. They're called Trifurcon. I mentioned that even in the article. Trifurcon means that instead of the pin pushing against the motherboard, or instead of this is the female socket, instead of that pushing against the motherboard pin on just one side, it actually has extra metal on the different sides, and it grabs onto that pin on 3 separate sides. There's even one that grabs on 4, but I don't like that one. It's the one that grabs on 4 is a little bit tight. For the 2E, it's called the AMP6, and they're available from the DigiKey company, a mail order place. Trouble is, I mentioned a lot of these details in the article, but I didn't mention the number of the crimp pins for the 2E version. So I've got a bunch of 2E housings, and I don't have the crimp pins, but I'm going to try to see if DigiKey can help me out on that. They've made their catalog entirely online. The color coding has to be worked out before you can create the cable. Now with the 2GS and the 2E, I think it's a consistent color coding. The negative for common is black, plus, let's see, the +5 is red or orange, the +12 is yellow, the -12 is green, and the -5 is blue. But on these power supplies, they don't follow a standard color coding. You really have to measure each wire and write it down what it is, because there's variation. Like I remember on this one, the blue was actually -12, and but on the 2GS, -12 is green. But the main thing is you want to make sure that the voltages coming out of the 2GS Molex 7 plug are identical to the voltages coming out from your standard 2GS power supply. It doesn't really matter that much what the color coding is of the wires, but just make sure that those are the voltages coming out. Let's see, I think I'll show the pictures now. Oh, one more thing to say before I do that. When I mentioned this has got excessive robust power output, 230 watts for this one. I've got one on my shelf at home. I haven't even assembled it yet, but I call it the Goliath. It is rated on its, self-rated on the power supply is 350 watts. Okay.
Stephen, you lost your mic.
Yeah, you're about to step on it.
Oh, whoops. Oh, how did I do that?
I think I had it too last year, so.
Okay.
Let's try it there.
Okay, let's see. So here come the pictures. Okay, there's a close-up that shows the Molex 7 plug. This is one out of a standard internal GS power supply. This is the one that I've made. Again, I put the words facing slots to make it easy to find how to plug it in. Okay. There's a close-up, and that shows the polarizing pin there that prevents you from plugging it in too far to the left or too far to the right. Let's see, here's a picture showing a bunch of Molex 7 plugs. I mentioned they're easily found on eBay, and these are the Trifercon crimp pins. Okay. Those are the wires. You can see I bought the wires in 1,000-foot rolls, and this was mostly in the late 90s. I think I mentioned I made about 200 of these between 96 and 2000, but it's dropped way down since then. That'll be the black wire for the common, the red for the +5, blue for +12, green for -12, and blue for -5.
Are you using a heavier gauge for the +5 and +12 volts?
The question is, am I using a heavier gauge for +5 and +12 because of the amperage, right? Yeah, definitely that would be a good idea, but I'm using the heavy gauge also for the low amperage lines, I guess because I've got those wires already on the 1,000-foot.
So what gauge wire are you using there?
I think these are all AWG 18, which is the same gauge as on the factory power supplies. Okay, but with the AWG numbering system, it's kind of reversed. Smaller numbers actually means thicker wire. So if you had AWG 14, it would be a thicker wire than 18. I think I could use smaller gauge for the minus voltages because they have such a low amperage, but I've already got these wires available, so I'm just using them.
What size are those rolls?
Those are 1,000-foot on each roll.
And how from top to bottom of the roll?
Oh, how big is the roll?
Yeah.
That's probably about 10 inches, maybe. Okay. Okay. This shows some variations in the type of box that these things come in. This is a nice rectangular one, just like this. Or no, that, well, let's see. Oh, this one is a smaller one, but the wiring harness has to be external. I kind of like to put the wiring harness inside like I did with this one. After making about 50 of these, I moved it to the inside. The first 50, there was a big clump of wire solder joints inside of shrink tubing out here. But it looks a little bit better if it's on the inside. And this one is labeled as 200 watts. This one is 80 watts, and this one is 125 watts. I think the 80 watt one would certainly run a 2GS that's fully loaded with interface cards. Let's see, this is just showing the power supplies without anything having been done to them yet. You can see there's a tremendous number of wires, and there's a lot of them that look like this. This connector is called a Molex 4, and they'd be familiar to you because hard drives tend to have a connector for a Molex 4. It's got the +5, the common, and the +12. It can run hard drive plus any other accessories. Now what I've done here is I've left 3 of them on here. One could be for just connecting a voltmeter, and what I did here is I put a Molex 4 male plug to run a little fan, and I've connected things like pencil sharpeners and stuff like that. You could put lights, you could put LEDs, you could put toys. With this thing being able to do 230 watts, it has a huge capacity beyond what the computer is ever going to need. And the Molex 4 is handy for showing that. Before doing any soldering, before doing any cutting of wires and soldering, you should measure voltages to make sure that this thing is giving correct voltages. Now, this one, it says 9.8 volts, and it's on the yellow line that should be given 12 volts. But the thing is with these, when there's no load on them, some of them run a little bit low on the voltage. When I plugged in the hard drive into this, it went up there to about 11.5. So it's really no problem if it runs a little bit low. It could be a problem if it's running high. This is the red line over here, and it's measuring 5.02 volts. That's the 5 volts is to run the circuit boards, and this is exactly on target. This one is, let's see, where is it? This is minus 9.1 volts. That would be the green line. And minus 4.9 volts. So that to the 12 volt line just run a little bit low, but it's not a problem. The 12 volt line is for running motors and things like hard drive or floppy drive. This one, let's see, I mentioned that you can run accessories on the power supply, and I've made this up. Whoever wins this in the lottery, oh, let's see, I should start passing the box around. Did everybody get one of those little cylinder things?
No.
Oh, let's see, Martin could, here's the box. Let's see, pass it around. Anybody who wants to be in the lottery, get one of those and print your name on it so I can read it. And then after everybody's got one of those cylinders, we'll throw away the blanks and pass this along and collect all of those, and I'll do the lottery and give this thing away.
You want me to collect them in this?
Oh yeah, yeah. After everybody that's interested in the lottery has got one, then throw away all the extras. I think I got about 50 extras in there. Okay. But anyway, this picture shows Molex 4s for connecting accessories and stuff. So like if you want to do 5 volt light, you use this wire here. 12 volt is over here. That little fan is connected to the 12 volt. And these can run concurrently with the computer. I've made, let's see, I think I made about 20 of them where there was a Y cable where I did further soldering to make, to put 2 different plugs on the same power supply. I remember I made about 20 of those, GS and GS, or 2E and 2E, or even GS with a 2E, and both computers can run concurrently without any interference. Heat shrink insulation tubing. I imagine everybody here is familiar with this. When soldering, you slip this heat shrink tubing over the solder joint. Actually, the smallest size for the crimp pins is 3/32, not 1/4 of an inch. But I recommend putting at least 2, and probably better to have 3 layers of heat shrink tubing when soldering this up. Okay. Yeah, you slip the tubing on and then use a lighter to warm it up, and then it shrinks to cover the solder joint. This shows the interior of this one. Let's see, when I was finishing up on it, you have all of these wires. There's actually too many wires in the red and the yellow. Some of these I just folded them over and put a piece of heat shrink on them. There is a LED indicator light up here which has, I think, a red line and a black line going to it. The green LED is just to indicate on and off. It's shown there. On some of these I even put a potentiometer for the fan. I think a 50-volt potentiometer, so that you could dial down the fan speed if necessary. Now this fan is running real cool, even running at full speed, so I didn't bother doing it. But if there was a noisy fan, you put in a 50-ohm potentiometer. Oh, good.
And you have about 2 minutes.
Let's see. Did everybody turn one in who wanted to win the giveaway power supply? There's not even that many in here. It looks like only maybe 20. So you have a pretty good chance. Anybody else
How
who
much does
didn't?
that cost normally?
What?
How much would that cost if you sold it?
This? Oh, you mean how much did I buy it for?
How much
Or
do you
what if I
sell
was-
it for?
Oh, if I were selling it, I'd probably sell this one for maybe 45 bucks. But I didn't bring any for the vendor fair. I thought that it'd make it look like this is a big sales pitch for the vendor fair. So I didn't bring any. This one's going for free. Okay. Just another interior shot. Let's see, that is the strain relief. I wrote down the voltages to make sure that I didn't get confused. I believe this white wire doesn't have any purpose, so I just folded it over and put shrink tubing on it. There it is during the burn-in at home. You can see it's this unit here. There is the wire going into the board. If you want to run it through the back, you'd have to break some of that plastic. But I ran it for, I think, about 10 hours at home. There's, it shows the plug on the motherboard. There, that's the last picture, waving goodbye with it. Okay. Oh, here, let me back that up. Okay. Okay, so I've got all of them who are interested in getting the free power supply. Okay, well, I'll do the drawing. I'll stir them up real good. Ping pong balls would be better, but they're too expensive. Okay, here it comes. See, nothing up my sleeve because there's no sleeve. Okay, the lucky winner is John Van Welligan. Oh, okay. Oh, hey. Okay. Oh, another thing is now I have this 10-page manual. I only brought the one copy for the person winning it. But if anybody wants to have it on a disc, the text file for this manual is on this one. Okay. And one last detail. There is a slight danger that since this is underneath the computer table and you have a lot of junk on your computer table, maybe some metal object like a paper clip falls off the table onto this thing and falls right through that fan hole. So I took this from a milk carton and I call it the paper clip blocker. So you put, sure, real simple but real important, okay? But the idea is just to prevent any metal objects from falling into it. Okay, thank you. That's it.
not, you can't light the inside.
What?
You cover it over the ventilation, right?
Yeah, well, it doesn't really cover it. I
Let's
mean,
see,
the air
up
can
next
still get in and
is
out.
Kelvin Sherlock
Okay.
with how to write an
Let's see here. What I'll do is give you the box.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if the fan blows out.
Oh, another thing is, this thing's got a selectable voltage for input, 110 or 220. So if you came from another country that used 220, you could just move the slider there. Okay.
Who's the next?
Kelvin Sherlock.
Okay.
Kelvin not here.
Oh, and these are just extra little pins, you know, like if you want to put a pencil sharpener or anything, and this one's all made up. Okay. I'll give you this fan as a toy. Keep my voltmeter. Okay. Oh, to a 2E. You know, the problem with the 2E was that I've got plenty of the 2E plugs, but I forgot to put the order number for the crimp pins for the 2E in here, and I just can't figure out what number they're supposed to be. Oh, here, I'll give you a couple copies of the article. Oh, I got plenty left over. Let's see if that's it. Okay. Well, I suppose you could adapt it to a T if you took the plug from an old 2E.
I've got an old burned out power supply.
For a 2E? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, basically, you just let's see. What are you going to do? You got to map out the voltages from. You got to map out the voltages for the 2E plug. And I think the two black ones are at the bottom. Let's see.
Oh, the plug's not.
Yeah, if you have a good 2E power supply, you can just put the voltmeter on and do that. Let's see. Oh, here, don't forget the paperclip blocker. Okay. Oh, here, for good luck, there's your winning.
Well, thank you, sir.
Oh, well, thanks for attending. My feelings would really be hurt if I passed around all those little cylinders and nobody wanted it at all. I think about 3 years ago, I actually saw one of these on the giveaway table.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, well, I saw, must have been 5, 6, or 7 things with my handwriting on the, I tend to put labels on things, and the worst thing is if you go and sell something on eBay and then somebody puts it back up there at double the price. And I've seen that several times. Okay. Did everybody who's interested get a copy of the article? Okay. Thanks, Steve. Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
What's that?
I got a picture.
Oh, good, okay.
I don't know whether I don't.
Oh, well, it's, I hope you took a lot. Oh, yeah, thanks for, yeah, with films, you know, people are shy to take me, just, maybe it's wasting some film, but, you know, somebody would take 100 pictures here.
That's all that counts.
Yeah, I had to give that kind of explanation about language and presentation. because in academia, you're supposed to do a conference presentation first, then publish the article, and then get comments from people. But I just think, you know, 20 years ago.
And I've even gotten that.
Oh, did this one came out? Yeah, you know, when I was looking through the newsletters up there, if I see one where I got an article, collecting, even though it got several episodes issued. I think this is
Yeah,
I think they have a long article about Kansas. Well, they it's like 34 pages. What happened? What's the next one?
So you want to write
At one point, yeah, I don't know if you guys still have it, but there was
Who's going to next?
Kevin Sherlock, writing in FSD. He's missing an idea.
So if I was to translate, somebody would have one file system built in for its OS, from another file system.
Well,
You're implying like a plug-in circuit board.
Right. There was also an FST for Windows. You could, if you had,
I had
Probably figured this out already, but Kevin's not scheduled until 4:15.
I was doing something at school where all we had and I typed a document in Word or Excel, saved it on my